in the audience today, as well as everybody who's watching us online. First item of business is the consent agenda. Today's consent agenda, I'm sorry. I want to get down to the business. We're going to stand, please, for the pledge.
All right.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for that gentle reminder.
Yes.
Commissioner Imdek is out of town, Washington, I believe, working on behalf of us there today, so that's why you get me. All right, the consent agenda, the items on there are the approval of the legal and I-Compass County Board minutes for September 5th, 2023, the auditor's warrants and claims, authorization for Prairie Woods Environmental Learning Center special hunting event for November 10th through 12th, 2023, approval of human service warrants and claims, notice of appointment and oath of office to the Community Supervision Advisory Committee. I believe this is a state-level committee that Tammy Jo Lieberg is being appointed to.
Correct.
Cancellation of human service warrants, and that's what I have to this point. Do we have anything else that needs to be added to the consent agenda?
I would like to add a resolution for a grant agreement between the county attorney and Minnesota Office of Justice Programs.
All right, unless there's objection, we'll add it to the consent agenda. All right, so added. I would like to pull that item from the consent agenda. But first, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion that we approve the consent agenda minus the resolution for the grant agreement between Canada County Attorney and Minnesota Office of Justice Programs.
I'll second it.
Commissioner Anderson to the left moves, and Commissioner Anderson to the right seconds. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented minus item, I guess we'll label that G, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. So resolution 2023-32, Shane Baker is our county attorney. Shane, would you just give us a brief synopsis of what this is? And I assume this is something that takes place annually?
That is correct. Since 2017, we've received $70,000 per year for a grant for providing victim services in the county. It's helped fund our second victim services coordinator position. It's been in the budget every year since then. The only difference this year is they're doing it 1 year at a time, so it's $70,000 this year. And it was in the budget that I submitted earlier this summer.
And just to clarify for folks out there who might wonder what falls under victim services, can you give us just a brief glimpse into that?
Yes. Anytime there's a case our office handles that has a victim of a crime, whether it's domestic assaults, criminal sexual conduct, theft, you name it, they work with the victim. They obtain their input on what they'd like to see happen with the case, provide them or direct them to possible services they can access, and allow them to exercise their rights in providing input to our office and to the court.
All right. Sounds like a great program, and thank you for providing that.
I'll just point out what the resolution is, so certainly those that are listening can know. It's between the County Attorney's Office and the Office of Justice Programs, Department of Public Safety, for prosecutorial services to crime victims during the period October 1st, 2023 through September 30th, 2024. The resolution also grants me or my designee authority to sign into any agreements or amendments to implement this and be the administrator and fiscal agent of the grant. This language is the same as in preceding resolutions.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Byrd.
I so move that we approve the motion for the resolution 2023-32.
There's a motion to approve the resolution. The chair will second. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of approving resolution 2023-32 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And, all right, next it is our pleasure to have presenting to us today Barb Chafee from Central Minnesota Jobs and Training Services. This is the annual report for CMJTS. Commissioner Dwayne Anderson is the current board representative on the Joint Powers Board. So, Barb, welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board and guests. My name is Barb Chafee. I'm the CEO for Central Minnesota Jobs and Training Services, serving 11 counties, including Candy, Ohio County. My staff and I are honored to present to you today and answer any questions that you have during or after our presentation. Well, year 2023 actually marks our 39th year together as partners in workforce development, supporting members of Candy, Ohio County, looking for work, and local employers in need of qualified workers. CMJTS serves youth, adults, dislocated workers, public assistant clients, veterans, diverse populations, local businesses, and much, much more. Today you will hear a client success story from Candy, Ohio County, and the impact and success of our great partnership and the services that we provide. Going on with our agenda, I'm hoping that I'm pressing the right one. I think I did it right.
Yep.
Okay, good. Our agenda is really threefold, and the business part of it, I am required under federal law and state statute to bring you the annual fiscal audit, the annual program performance reports. We do always bring you the commercial insurances because we want our commissioners to be make sure that they're covered. And then we also bring the county demographics by Luke Reiner, who is our DEED LMI regional analyst, and I'll explain that in just a moment. But one of the last things that we do is we're going to talk to you about really what's happening right here in your county. Well, I have to tell you that something historical happened this year in our Joint Powers Board. We have, out of 11 county commissioners, 8 of them are brand new. So as we look at Kanabec, Candy, Ohio, McLeod, Meeker, Mille Lacs, Pine, Renville, and Wright counties, you see a number 1 after them, and it's because this is their first year on our board. What was really kind of lucky for us was that the 3 officers stayed on the board, because it's really hard to all of a sudden come on the board and be trained, and it's like, whoa, there's a lot to learn. So we have Rick Green from Chisago County, he's been with us 16 years. We have Lisa Phoebe from Sherburne County, she's been on our board for 6, and of course Mike Waring for 12 years from Isani County. So it was a big change, but it was well worth it. I'm very excited about it. But I do want to pause for just one moment to thank Candy, Ohio County Board for appointing Commissioner Dwayne Anderson to our Joint Powers Board. We look forward to Commissioner Anderson's leadership and commitment on the Joint Powers Board, because we're a nationally recognized board under the Workforce Innovations and Opportunity Act. A lot of things that you already learned. A special recognition to Commissioner Anderson for attending, here he is, his first year, and he attended the August Minnesota Association of Workforce Boards along with me. It's the summer conference in Duluth, which showed that he's very committed, so thank you for that. But I have to tell you that I lived in Duluth because I was going to college up there. And so I went and brought some really warm jackets and things like it. It was like 100 degrees. I was like, whoa. It was hot. That's the hottest I've ever seen it in Duluth. So even wearing open-toed shoes, your feet were really hot with all the walking that we did. So thank you. Thank you for coming. I think it was really important for us. Let me see, our next one. I wanted to let you know that because we had so many new Joint Powers Board members, we had to do a lot of training. We had to teach them about the legal duties under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which was terribly boring, I'm sure, but it was really critical. We talked about the roles of the chief elected officials. They're called CEOs now. Before they were called local elected officials, LEOs. So, and then we didn't talk about the board agreement. That's something coming up. But the composition of the board is what we talked about, and that's one county commissioner is appointed from each of the 11 counties. And then it's the only board that can have an alternate. So if Commissioner Anderson isn't able to come to that meeting, he can assign someone else, or this board can assign somebody else. You always want to have a voice on that board. The reason is because you say Joint Powers Board. Under federal law, you have the power. And so it's really important to have that voice. The Joint Powers Board meets quarterly. They meet March, June, September, and December. I've seen a lot of the new commissioners coming and sitting on the Workforce Development Board too, so they can understand that board. But if you become a chair, a vice chair, or a secretary of the Joint Powers Board, you automatically become an officer on the Workforce Development Board. And so as the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary, you have oversight over that Workforce Development Board, and you can bring that back to the Joint Powers Board of what's going on. You're assigned to a committee. You also want to be able to attend the MOB summer meeting in August up in Duluth, and you were the first one to be chosen to go to Washington, D.C., to go to the Governor's Workforce Development Board meetings and the Minnesota Association of Workforce Boards meetings as well. So lots of big things happen, and it doesn't make any difference if you're the chair, the vice chair, the secretary, you still have the option to go to those things. And I will keep you aware of it. We also had some fun stuff going. I had 42 slides of fun on the history of workforce development. I had to do something that made it fun because when you're talking about federal laws and things like that, it really does get somewhat boring. But think of all the time that they put in, and they did an amazing job. One of the things that I was corrected on in Duluth is that I thought we were at 161 years old for workforce development, and my partner from a different state who was very, very smart came, it's really 171, so I was off by a little bit. So now I'm going to have to go back and train everybody all over again. But it's been around for a long, long time. My staff would welcome the opportunity if you ever have a working group to come in where it's more relaxed. We have a lot more time. You can ask all kinds of questions so you can really get an understanding of all of the things that we do in your county. This is one of those fun things that we had within learning a little bit more about the history. And so the question would be, what workforce development program was established in 1933 and still exists today? And the answer is Wagner-Peiser or job service. And we have one of the only people in this room who happens to be a very good friend, Melissa, who you all know, who is a part of this program. And so I'm glad you came. See how this worked out so good? But Franklin D. Roosevelt was the one who authorized that many, many years ago. So next, this is for those of you who are in the room that you don't know exactly, I'm the director over the 11 county areas, and it's it says Local Workforce Development Area, or LWDA 5. That whole area, I'm the director over. There's actually 16 local workforce development area directors in the state. I happen to be one of them. And then we wrap around that kind of a blue area, which is the metro area. So we have quite a long drive in between. We have several sites. We have Cambridge, Hutchinson, Monticello, which is our comprehensive corporate office, which I just came from. We also have other centers, Litchfield, Malacca, Mora, North Branch, Pine City, Wilmer. We're in Richwater College here. And then Olivia and Sandstone. This is in your right-hand side of your packet, along with the Candiota High County. I wanted to show this to you because this is something that you've been asking me to bring to this board for the last 20-some years. And it is from Luke Reiner. He's the deed regional analyst, and it's all of your data. So all you have to do is take this out, take it with you when you go to some of your other board meetings, and all of that data is right here for you. The Workforce Development Board sees this data every month, except for August when we go up north. So just so an FYI, and then there's also the regional report is also on that side. This is my staff, and the only one here is Leslie today. So we're partners today in this. So normally we have quite a few more. So I'm going to take over Tricia's as she's working on some projects for me. In December of each year, the Joint Powers Board reviews the annual fiscal audit, and fiscal auditors Clifton Larson Allen come in and do a great job. So they come in October. So what really do they review? Because this is some of the important data that I have to bring to you. They select the federal or state funded programs. Last year, the ones you're going to see, I think, are federal, and the ones for the coming year are going to be state programs. They review the designated case files, the internal controls manual. Commissioner Anderson can get that copy at any point. We keep that updated each year. Because it is evaluated, and then the cost categories and the budgets, and Clifton Larson Allen, who happens to be the top 10 in the nation, and that's why we have them, because we really want them to dig deep to make sure we're doing everything correctly. They also evaluate all the fiscal processes. So I can't see that because it's too small, so I'm going to actually take out this, and it's in your packet to the left. But I can tell you that we had an unmodified audit, which means we had a clean audit, free from any material misstatements. We had the internal controls over financial reports. There's no material weaknesses. There's no significant deficiencies. There is no non-compliance materials to the financial statements, and we also had the federal awards. The same is true, no material weaknesses, no deficiencies. The type of audit reporting issued on compliance for the major programs was also unmodified, all clean reports. So this is almost unheard of if you're a nonprofit to go through. I think this is our 14th or 15th year of having clean audits. Any audit finding disclosed that are required to be reported in accordance with 2 CFR, none. And the only thing that we ever want to hear a yes on is this auditee a qualified low-risk auditee? And that's yes. What we did is we had the WIOA clusters were pulled. If you are over 750,000, we're over 8 million, we have to go through this type of a audit, which is really important. So another celebration this year. I'm going to do HRs, and so you're going to see the commercial insurances, and this is important too because we want Commissioner Anderson to be covered. And so we have, if you look at 4 of the blue lines down or 4 of them up, it says management liability. Directors and officers' liability per claim aggregate is 2 million. Whenever you have a nonprofit, you want to make sure that they are bringing you this type of information. Because if when you're on somebody's, board, you have to be covered. The other thing that this board asked me to do last year was at the very bottom, it says policy type cyber. We have been hacked. I get hacked at least 5 or 6 times a day, and it's even getting worse. So you asked me to up that to 2 million, and we did that immediately. So just so you know, we're covered, and I guess I don't know about what's happening here, but anytime you are in a position that you have or that I have, it seems like, those hacks continue. This is in your, this is the org chart, and so that's in there for your reading pleasure. We have the corporate team, the program team, the business team, and then it shows my name and all of the other boards that I'm on and covered. And now I'm going to let Leslie come up, and she's going to have some things for you as well.
Good morning, and thank you for having us today. I get the pleasure.
Leslie?
Oh.
Would you just for the record?
Introduce myself?
Yourself?
Yes, I am Leslie Watowitz, the development manager.
Thank you.
So I oversee our business services team and specific grants. So our success story today highlights one of those grants and our business services. So it's kind of a combo success story. I prefer to have the customers themselves come and share their story. Unfortunately, they both work overnights, and that will come through as I share their story. So I'm going to apologize in advance because I don't want to miss things that they have shared. So I will probably not give you the best eye contact and do a little bit more reading. Katicia lived in Las Cayas, Haiti, prior to coming to the U.S. Katicia shared her process of coming to America. In January 2023, the Biden administration launched a program through which nationals of Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela may request to come to the United States, as long as they have a family member who can support them. It provides a period of parole for urgent humanitarian reasons or significant public benefit. Katicia's brother-in-law filed the application, and 2 months later, her application was approved. Upon approval, she had to submit biometrics and underwent a background check. Once that process was completed, she received a travel authorization which granted her permission to board a plane to come to America. In April, Katicia boarded a plane from Port-au-Prince to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Because it was her first time traveling abroad, her sister was worried that she'd get lost and miss the connection to Minneapolis. So her brother-in-law flew to Fort Lauderdale to meet her, and together they flew back to the MSP airport. Upon leaving the airport, it was a shock, she shared, because although it was April, it was really cold. It was her first time seeing snow. Katicia did say that was very exciting. Her background prior to coming to the U.S. was as a registered nurse. She shared how it had been difficult to find employment in the field because of the language barrier. So for those of you who don't know, those who live in Haiti speak French. It's not a popular language here in the U.S. Most employers for healthcare, especially here in the rural areas, require fluency in English. Kinderland has a similar story. However, it was her brother who sponsored her and assisted with the application. She too was a nurse back home in Haiti. She graduated in 2020 and worked in different departments like the emergency room, the operating room, and as an OB. Katicia's brother-in-law and Kinderland's brother, who does happen to be the same individual, heard about the Internationally Trained Professionals Grant and assisted both women in applying. So this grant that we applied for helps individuals who have a foreign credential, help them transition that credential to get it U.S. certified and become employed in that field here in the U.S. So Vanessa, who is our CMJTS career navigator here in Wilmer, enrolled both Catesia and Kinderland in the Internationally Trained Professionals Grant. Using these funds, we were able to assist them with finding healthcare positions at Bethesda in Wilmer. Both ladies were hired in May as full-time resident care assistants working overnights, earning a wage of $18.76 an hour. So this is below the registered nurse, but right now they really need the opportunity to work in the field, to learn how we do things in the US, and really beef up those English skills. So while they're at Bethesda, they are gaining the nursing skills, learning English, and they're also taking online training to get their CNA certifications. When Bethesda hired these staff, they were able to receive funding through the OJT program. So this is a business services opportunity. It is a wage reimbursement that we offered to Bethesda to provide extra mentorship and specific assistance to ensure work success. These funds help a business with more one-on-one time for new staff training. The initial OJT contract provided wage reimbursement for 13 weeks. There is frequent communication during the OJT contract to ensure things are going smoothly. In August, a need for additional training to address the language and communication barriers was identified. In working with Bethesda, the trainees, and their family members, we agreed to extend the OJT for another 16 weeks through other program funding. The big concern that came up is when these women were shown and explained what to do, they would shake their head, yes, yep, we understand it. But they clearly didn't when they actually went to do the work. So some of the solutions that we came to as a group were that a translator was going to translate a key list of phrases provided by the Bethesda with the help of family members that they work on at home and with the Wilmer ABE. Our staff encouraged attendance at a free class at the Wilmer ABE called Skills for the Nursing Assistant. There's also a comprehension test offered through ABE that they can take to get a better understanding of where they are at with their reading and their understanding of English skills. All of us, CMJTS, Bethesda, and their family are supportive of their continued success at Bethesda. We identified who they were able to communicate with on site at Bethesda, who could understand them so that they had a go-to person to communicate with if they didn't understand or if they needed help. And then we also offer support services to help them accomplish their work goals, including helping them buy scrubs and getting them gas cards to start work. Today, the ladies are working full-time, they have access to ESL classes and training, and they have both passed their written CNA test, which was a huge accomplishment. Because they are doing the on-the-job training to help with their CNA skills, they are both confident they'll pass their CNA test on September 29th. Additionally, the women are in the process of getting their nursing credentials from Haiti evaluated. This is a difficult process. All of the different vendors, when you're getting credentials evaluated, some want them to send in their original documents. As a person coming to this country, I wouldn't want to give up original documents either. There are other agencies that will connect with the school, the education facility, and get them directly, which in this case we are able to do from Haiti. But some of our other enrollments, they're here. They've come from the Ukraine. The schools are not able to do that. So there are a lot of barriers in working with these individuals. But once their credentials are evaluated, they will get additional assistance to pass the NCLEX RN tests so that they can actually move up and become nurses here in the U.S. The partnership with Bethesda, us, and the Grant Professional Grant has helped these two new Americans continue their careers in healthcare. Bethesda and CMJTS have partnered often in the past. Most recently, this past summer, Bethesda has been a partner in our youth summer camps. They provided job shadow opportunities, they offered tours, and they also sponsored the camp lunches, which I have to say were delicious because I was there the day that it was sponsored. But I have a quote to share from Katie Zemer, who is the Director of Human Services there at Bethesda. Bethesda and CMJTS have now formed a partnership aimed at supporting individuals facing employment barriers, particularly those who face challenges such as cultural adjustments and language barriers. CMJTS has shown its commitment to assisting job seekers and provides funding for additional training and resources to enhance the employability of such individuals. Bethesda has collaborated with CMJTS by hiring 2 individuals into caregiver roles. This partnership has helped bridge the gap between potential employees and employers, as both organizations have worked together to address the unique training needs of these individuals. Through this collaboration, our goal is to help these employees thrive in their new roles and also contribute to a more inclusive and diverse workforce. And we just had what Bethesda is all about here. And any questions?
Thank you for that. And are there any questions from the board?
I just have one comment, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Anderson.
That first meeting when I went to Central Minnesota Jobs and Training Joint Power Board meeting, I was sitting around with other commissioners. I go, well, what's this about? And they go, I don't know. And it's my first time there. And I thought, okay, well, there's probably a couple of us that are new. And I turned to another one. Well, what is it? What do we do here? I don't know either. So it turned out none of us really knew except the people that were in charge of, the chair, vice chair, and the secretary. But so it's been a good learning experience. I know I kind of like numbers, so it's fun to come a little early if I can, and then hear the job numbers and then to learn about what you guys do and my general view of how they do it right now is if somebody needs a job, they come to you guys, and then also businesses can come to them and say, hey, we need people with these kind of skills, and the people that come to you for jobs, they might not have the skills, but they can be trained up or screened by you guys and go, hey, if you can get a little more training or learn this kind of skill, then we got a good job for you. So it's a really good service that's provided by the different counties here that are part of the Central Minnesota Jobs and Training Services.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I can just make a comment, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Berg.
Yes, it's definitely a win-win situation, and just really kind of piling on what Commissioner Anderson was saying too, how what you're doing for people in our community really makes a difference, but also you're putting people in the workforce, and it's really good for our business. You're making a difference, and thank you for what you've been doing all these years. I've been hearing about the program for quite a few years, and it seems like it just continues to grow and keeps moving forward. Thank you.
We always continue to look for opportunities that help support different initiatives, such as this one, the Internationally Trained Professionals Grant. Employers are struggling to find workers, and so this was another opportunity.
Barb, if I may, just have you come back up. And just a note, longtime Candidac County Commissioner Harlan Madsen served on your board for years, and then when he retired and I came on the board, I was on your board, Joint
Yes.
Powers Board, for 2 years. I recall discussion at that time revolving around difficulties that the state of Minnesota might have been placing on your funding. With the budget surplus last year, did that change to the positive? Can you give us kind of a
Yes.
without getting into any trouble?
I can
give us
absolutely
a
say
sense
that,
of what happened legislatively the last session.
Minnesota has been really good this year because they actually gave us extra money, which was much needed. Our youth program really needed a boost. It went up like 30-some%. So we're going to get some extra money. And that's also for dislocated worker and adult programs, at least for this year. But the bad news is that the federal, they would like to not give us any money for youth. They don't think it's important. It is. The youth are our future. I'm a baby boomer. I'm going to retire at some point, and a lot of baby boomers are doing that, and we need that youth to come up and take our place. And the young people of today are that baby boomer group that's can move up and take on these jobs and do it very well because they were born with a phone in their hand when they were very little, and I mean, they just know things. So when it comes to IT, they just know things a lot more than I do. So those are the harsh things. We're also looking at a possible government shutdown, a federal government shutdown on October 1st. That's worrying me a lot because then we don't get our money until the day before Christmas or the day after it. It's a long time to wait for those funds. We have to keep on moving. We have to keep on helping businesses and getting people jobs. So it makes it very difficult. But thanks for that question because we did have it really difficult. And it just so happened that Minnesota had extra funds. And we went and asked them for it. So, and made a really good pitch on the Hill that we have to do more for our youth. We just have to. If we're going to have people in positions and businesses with good, strong workers, we have to have those youth programs. So
It seems a little counterintuitive that business and industry is crying for workers.
yeah.
And somehow Washington doesn't think that training the youth to replace all of those of us who are going to be leaving the workforce at some point in time, and generally speaking at a relatively lower wage, doesn't seem to make any sense. It sounds like they're tripping over dollars, picking up pennies. Is that? I won't ask you if it's
Yeah.
political posturing or not.
Well,
That's unfair of me to ask you, but.
I think the focus they have said less about the workforce development boards and more about our colleges. But you're seeing a whole lot of people that aren't going for a 4-year college. They might go to a 2-year college. So things are shifting. Things are shifting. I happen to be the chair of Anoka Ramsey Community College. And, I'm seeing it all over that they're changing their programs and services to better meet the individuals for those 2 years. So the whole United States is changing, and we have to change with it, even though we're baby boomers. But what I worry about is stalling and not putting that money where it's supposed to be right now, and then going into the whole government and everything shutting down. I don't think that's healthy for us. So
Sure.
let's pray that it doesn't happen and that they do a continuing resolution. Because if they do a continuing resolution to even December or November, we will get issued our funds. So, and hopefully that will be the outcome. But we're getting pretty close, so. And I go to the White House briefings virtually. I'll fly there every Thursday. So I'm trying to keep abreast and keep ahead of everything. So thank you for having us again. We really enjoy coming here, So thank you. Any other questions that you have? I'll be happy to answer them.
Any further questions from the board? All right, well then, thank you again so
Thank you.
much. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for your report today.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
you being here.
Thank you.
All right, this is the next item. Planning Commission recommendations, zoning administrator Eric Van Dyken. Eric, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Eric Van Dyken, zoning administrator. Before you today with first a couple recommendations of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission met on September 11th. The first request that the Planning Commission considered is a request to amend some plat conditions. Back in 2004, there was a little bit of development done on the non-riparian or non-lake side of Lake Florida. And with that plat, there were some conditions attached to it that were deemed appropriate at the time. Some of those have, through the years, been found to be a little problematic. Fairly soon after, in 2005, a couple of them were removed. The condition now that's being requested to be removed is a condition on who the properties can be sold to. Currently, the condition limits people in Walleye Beach and first addition to Walleye Beach, which is kind of the north and starting to wrap around a little bit maybe into the northwest side of Lake Florida. They're the only ones that can purchase these properties currently. And that's a little bit problematic for a number of reasons. It's also extremely difficult for staff to actually track and enforce in any real coherent manner. So the current owner of one of these lots is looking to sell it, has a buyer who is not in that area. We're looking to clean that up a little bit. The Planning Commission does recommend, and staff does heartily support, in this instance as well, the recommendation to remove this condition that limits who may purchase these properties.
All right, are there any questions from the board or a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve the removal of the condition based on the findings stated here.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Berg will second.
There's a motion and a second, thank you. Questions for Mr. Van Dyken? Mr. Commissioner Berg.
For the public, would you clarify where Walleye Beach is?
Yeah, Walleye Beach is on the lake side of Lake Florida, basically from the public access on the north side going to the west, and then first addition to Walleye Beach is right on that same stretch there. So, and then the plat in question itself is actually called Kelly Farms Addition. It's not on the lake, it's on the north side of the 13th Street Northwest there, and kind of around the old, what we would call the Thorson Farm, back on the north side there, so.
Okay, thank you.
It seems really odd to me that those conditions would have been allowed in the first place. Do you have any idea or speculation as to why they were placed there to begin with?
There was a practice back in the day of allowing some substandard plats. So what this did is actually plat lots that don't meet county standards. And to counteract or to mitigate some of the impact of that, they put on a number of conditions. That was probably not legal. That was probably also ill-advisable for a number of other reasons. It does tend to create kind of a hodgepodge of regulation out there, which is pretty easily viewed in the public's eyes as kind of a, what are we going to get sort of a thing, right? Go to one area of the county, you're regulating one way, or you're doing it another way somewhere else. It's also, frankly, very, very difficult to track and to for staff to actually enforce in any way. So we've gone away from that. So let's just say it was a practice that we've maybe grown out of.
Well, it seems to make sense to me to clean this up, and I want to thank you and the Planning Commission for bringing that to our attention. Anybody else with any comments or questions? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to approve the recommendations and findings of the Planning Commission on this matter. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Eric, thank you, and you have one other item for us, yes?
Yes, thank you. The second is a request of Jennifer Andrist for a conditional use permit. This would be for a dog kennel. Jennifer proposes to do some dog boarding, some dog training, and some dog breeding. The Planning Commission in this instance did recommend approval with 3 attached conditions, and I would like to talk to you a little bit about proposed condition number 2. Subsequent to the meeting, I had a chance to talk with the applicant a little bit about this condition. I'll read it and then I'll talk a little bit about it. Condition number 2 proposed is outdoor runs and exercise areas shall be closed during nighttime hours, 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. In talking with the applicant, she had a request that we might adjust those hours a little bit, and the reasoning would be as follows. She proposes that we would go 10 o'clock and 5 o'clock a.m., 10 o'clock p.m. to 5 o'clock. A couple of reasons. First of all, she's one who's up and at 'em in the morning, and she finds it would be rather difficult for her to be up at 5 o'clock working with animals and yet precluded from allowing some of those animals out. And actually, she points out that for a couple reasons, that would actually likely make more dog barking noise. First, the dogs respond to her activity when she's up. Secondly, dogs do have a limited amount of time that it's good for them to be locked in an enclosed area where they're kind of trained not to relieve themselves. And so we actually could be a little perhaps counterproductive by forcing these dogs to be indoors a little bit more. And so I do tend to agree with her, both on both ends, on the sliding it up an hour on the evening and loosening up a little bit in the morning. So she has a little bit more freedom to be active with those dogs and actually will probably be a lower potential impact in the neighborhood. So staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommendations be adopted with conditions 1 through 3 in the findings, with the one alteration of hours of operation, or excuse me, those hours of the dog runs open from 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock instead.
And Eric, just to clarify, this is a conditional use permit request?
That is correct.
All right. Is there a motion from the board?
I'll make the motion that we approve this with the conditions and findings, but that we modify condition number 2 to 10 PM. Operational hours are for the outdoor runs and exercise areas from 10 PM to 5 AM be limited, so.
I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second to approve the conditional use permit with the attached findings and conditions. Just a question, because it's been a while since I've done this, from my time on the City Planning Commission. Do we need to read the findings and conditions out loud in this case?
No, we don't.
Good. Thank you for that. We were always advised otherwise, so. Eric, just, I'm sorry, Commissioner Berg, go ahead.
No, finish your
Go ahead.
Oh, I just want to refer back to your minutes about, there was a neighbor who was concerned about the barking dogs. And you took that into consideration, so you still feel comfortable even though the neighbor's worried about the dogs barking early in the morning, or?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner.
Is there
There was a neighbor that had expressed some concern, generalized concern. The first thing probably to note is that the closest neighbor is at 700 feet, and the performance standard in our county ordinance is a 500-foot setback, so it is exceeded by several hundred feet here. And then generally, these conditions are kind of geared toward attempting to reduce any of those potential conflicts, keeping the dogs under control, limiting the number of dogs so it's not kind of open-ended, and then limiting the times when they can be out in their outdoor runs, of course. I would note generally that we have approved a pretty decent number of dog kennels through the years. One of the patterns that we do see is that once they're in operation, I'm not sure that I have a record of a single complaint after. So I guess I would just say that we can joyfully report that when they've been in operation, some of the fears that have been expressed on the front end haven't been realized from what we've seen.
Thank you.
And Eric, you just alluded to this, but it seems like we've seen quite a number of these requests for dog boarding, breeding facilities. It would be nice if sometime in the near future, I think if you could give us some indication of what the county regulations are in terms of facilities like this, and I'm not even thinking necessarily these smaller ones. These aren't an issue, but I know that Minnesota is one of the states that has a high concentration of puppy mills. And we probably have some of those in the area. At least that's what I'm hearing from my friends in the animal world. I'm not going to ask you for that off the top of your head, but if that's something that you could provide just as a point of information, I'd truly appreciate it.
Would you prefer that in form of a memo at some point, or?
Sure, just shoot an email out, and that should be all that we'd need. Do we prefer that come to the administrator, or can he just send that to all of us?
I will send something out and copy Kelsey on it as well.
I appreciate that. Sorry for springing that on you.
No.
All right. We have a motion and a second to adopt the conditional use permit with the attached conditions and findings. Anybody else? All right. All those in favor of approving the conditional use permit signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And Eric, you have one more item for us, a conflict waiver.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Continuing on with the next agenda item, you will see in your packet, I believe, a letter that kind of spells out the need for this. In this instance, Attorney John Kolb from Rinke Noonan Law Firm has been consulting with and is now being asked to consult with more deeply on governance structures for the South Fork Crow River Watershed, one plan. And as the planning phase comes to a conclusion, we look to form some sort of an entity that will be helpful in implementing this plan and then using the grant dollars from the state to implement conservation programs. And since Mr. Colbert, his law firm also represent the county individually on other matters, it's pretty standard procedure here, and we've done this in other watershed areas recently, for the county to waive any conflict of interest that might arise through this kind of representation in different areas. So that's my crib notes of it. The letter kind of spells it out a little bit more. Again, this is something that the county did recently do when we went through this in the Hawk Creek, Middle Minnesota area. Mr. Kolb represented us there as well, and we did have a waiver in that instance as well.
It sounded familiar that we'd done some action like this previously. And this area, is that Commissioner Dwayne Anderson's?
Yep, that would be me.
Area? I'd just ask if you have anything to
Yeah,
add.
I think it would be fine. I mean, the only time it would really come up as an issue is if there were like some sort of lawsuit, I would presume, or whatever, and at that time we could probably address it further. But for now, I think a waiver is fine. I mean,
Okay.
I don't have a problem with it, so.
Would you offer a motion?
Yes, I would move that how do we do this? We accept the conflict waiver, or we give a conflict waiver for Rinke Noonan to represent South Fork One Watershed, One Plan. Is that sufficient, or?
Yeah, I could maybe read the statement on the last page. It says here, acknowledged and agreed to. Candiwai County acknowledges that it has read and understands the potential conflict of interest as addressed in this letter, and hereby acknowledges and waives any potential conflict of interest as described herein.
Okay. That's my motion, Mr.
That's,
Chair.
all right. Sounds good. Thank you, I appreciate that. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Dale Anderson seconds. Discussion. Sounds fine to me. Anybody else? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the motion signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Eric, thank you.
You bet, thank you.
Appreciate that. We are coming up on 10. Should we let these gentlemen go and then we'll take a break?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, sounds fine. All right, we have next before us Matt Langen, Randy Fordyce, and Mark Ossendorf of the Minnesota Energy Connection XL Energy Route Permit Application.
Good morning.
Good morning. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you. My name is Randy Fordyce with Excel Energy, also with Matt Langen and Mark Osendorf. I'll turn it over to them in a few moments. Unfortunately, we've got a weird security thing on our flash drives, and I couldn't get it working, so I'm not able to bring it up on the screen. I do have copies of both the presentation that you were sent last week and the maps, if you'd like me to hand those.
And I believe if that's the same presentation,
Same as
we
this
have
one,
it on
Yes.
our
Okay, you
iPads
got
as
those?
well.
I will set these right here in case anyone wants to grab either the
That's
presentation or the maps.
Yeah, and perhaps the media could use that as well.
We could use the overhead on it too. We could just use the overhead camera.
We could. Yeah, we do have an overhead camera. Thank you
Okay.
for reminding me. And so if you just kind of wanted to place it that way, then
Sure.
that can be.
Where's
seen
the
by
best placement for it?
By the public.
You'll
So
see it.
Oh, right there.
Yep.
Okay, great.
just like that. So if you'll put that towards the center a little bit and then Administrator Baker will zoom in on that for us.
Fantastic. Thank you, and sorry for the technology.
No, no apology necessary.
Great.
You were further ahead on that than I would have been.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for inviting us. As I mentioned, my name is Randy Fordyce. I'm with Xcel Energy's Transmission Department, handle communications and public affairs. Wanted to take some time today to discuss the proposed Minnesota Energy Connection transmission line project that Xcel Energy has been working on for about a year. Kind of give you an update of where we're at now, how we got to this point, and then what the next year plus looks like as we move through the eventual permitting and regulatory process. As I mentioned, I handle communications and public affairs. Matt is our permitting lead for projects like this, and Mark Osendorf is our community relations manager for Central Minnesota. So as we go through, happy to answer any questions that you might have. Gets a little bit wonky sometimes when you're talking about projects like this, the size and scope and regulatory process. But the kind of nuts and bolts of it is that we're proposing a new transmission line to connect from wind energy in southwest Minnesota, namely southern Lyon County, that would be the endpoint for the project, to the existing grid connection at the Sherco power plant that is slated to retire over the coming decade. This is part of both Xcel Energy's proposal to deliver all of our electricity to customers with 100% carbon-free electricity, and also then meeting the new state of Minnesota law to deliver 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040. The Sherco plant's retirement was part of our kind of recent proposal, and then over some variations of regulatory discussion, the commission said, we came up with an idea to reuse the connection to continue just at the Sherco plant to continue to serve customers with renewable energies using a new power line. The commission said, we like the idea, but we want to see the details. It directed us to develop a certificate of need application, which is the first permit that is required for a project like this, and then also a route permit. Where is the project actually going to go? And so Matt will talk a little bit more about kind of that process and also the specific routes that could affect Candy, Ojai County. But that's kind of at a high level what we're looking at, about 160 to 180 mile double circuit power line. Double circuit means lines on either side of the poles. Going back to last year, we started with kind of this wide area that you see on the map to really noting Sherco on the northeast side, Lyon County on the southeast side, and really started working with all of the landowners within that area and local government, sending mailings saying, hey, this process is kicking off. Come join some meetings, learn about it, provide feedback on potential route options. Matt will go into a little more detail on the specifics of those, but really what we try to do are find areas that follow what Matt will call linear corridors, existing transmission lines, existing roadways, things like that, and minimize impact to ag operations, homes, and things like that. So have held quite a few public meetings over the last years, over the last year plus, including 2 in Wilmer. Had really good engagement in this area from your landowners and constituents, and are getting to the point where we'll soon file the route permit application. And again, I think it's probably best to turn it over to Matt now and let him kind of walk through the process that led us there. But all of us are open for questions at any time if the board has any.
Thank you. And just introduce yourself for the record, please. Thank you.
Certainly. Mr. Chair, Commissioners, thanks for having us here today. My name is Matt Langen. I'm with Xcel Energy. I am the permitting lead for the Minnesota Energy Connection project. Randy hit on a couple very important things that I'll highlight, and then we can talk about the details of the project. But number one is that the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission has routing and siting authority over large energy infrastructure like this transmission line project. So Xcel Energy intends to submit applications to the commission this fall for a certificate of need and a route permit application. We will describe that lengthy and robust public input process in a bit, but what I'd like to talk about first is before we ever get to a stage of filing those applications, our route development process, we want it to be a public-facing process. We don't intend to create routes and then just spring them on folks. This is really a collaborative effort where we want to be out in communities engaging with individual landowners, communities and local government units, getting feedback from those groups. And then, of course, our state and federal regulatory agencies participate very closely in this process. So what we do with all of that feedback is try to create the least impactful routes that we can. And importantly, when we make an application to the Public Utilities Commission, we are required to provide at least 2 route alternatives. So from Becker down to Southern Lyon County, we need to propose 2 alternatives that are constructible, that are viable, that represent the feedback that we've received along the way. And so when we start that effort, we really cast a broad net. As Randy showed, we have this large project study area where we looked for good routing opportunities. We looked to avoid homes. We looked to not propose routes that would require a structure in a lake. You can imagine that is heavily influential in the northern part of this project area, avoiding surface waters. We won't propose routes through a state park or federal land. Of course, we have to avoid airports. The list goes on, as you might imagine. And so that's some of the internal analysis that we do, and then we come out with a really robust set of route segment alternatives and bring those out to the public meetings. Again, your constituents have participated all along the way, both in our February and March round of open houses, as well as our open houses hosted this summer. So we got a lot of quality feedback that we take into account, and ultimately what we're trying to do is get to those 2 routes. So the stage that we're at now is kind of the final stage before we submit a route permit application, and that is to conduct a constructability review of potential routes. We want to make sure that the routes that we propose, we can actually build and operate for decades into the future. So that's kind of the final stage. We intend to file a route permit application. Will go to the regulatory process now. We intend to file our certificate of need and our route permit application at the end of October. And once we do that, the state really takes over the review of our proposal. They have a process that we anticipate is going to last about 15 to 18 months of public review with several public input opportunities along the way. Again, that's a certificate of need, as we have on the slide here, and a route permit. And they'll review those 2 applications jointly. So we won't have 2 sets of meetings. We'll have one combined set of meetings for each application. We find that to be a more efficient process, and the state wants it that way. A couple important public input opportunities within that state review that I wanted to point out, and this is on the public comment opportunities slide. Let me get that centered. The first set of meetings that the state will schedule are called public information and scoping meetings. They're going to develop an environmental impact statement, and they're going to ask the public, beyond the 2 routes that Xcel as the applicant proposed, are there other route segments that we ought to evaluate that might reduce the impacts even more than the routes that Xcel Energy proposed? So those meetings will happen probably toward the end of this year or very early in 2024. Once the scope is developed, the state will prepare a draft environmental impact statement to compare the impacts of the routes that are under consideration. And then public hearings will be held. Those will be administered by an administrative law judge. Those are likely to occur next summer after that EIS is released. And all of these meetings that I'm describing, the scoping meetings and the public hearings, will be held in the project area. They aren't like held in St. Paul. They'll be, we'll likely schedule something for the Wilmer area for the routes that are here. And so that's another input opportunity there. The administrative law judge is going to ask which of these routes should the commission approve. They want the feedback from agencies, local government units, individual landowners, which of these is the least impactful routes. So those will be next summer. And then we expect probably at the earliest, the route decision would be made by the end of 2024 or maybe first quarter of 2025. So that's kind of the time frame for the public review. We do have some information in front of you about our easement acquisition process. If a route, once the route is approved, we would seek an easement with those landowners to own and operate the line on their property. And they do get a payment for that easement area.
I'm just going to ask a quick
Please,
question.
Mr. Chair.
Because I didn't know the answer. The last bullet point on there says landowners can elect by the farm if they prefer. Can you explain that
Yes.
for somebody like me who doesn't have a ag background?
Yeah, yes, sir, and that's a very good question, Mr. Chair. So by the farm is a state statute that at a certain voltage, a certain capacity of line, that if the permittee at that point is not able to successfully negotiate an easement agreement with that landowner, the landowner can elect the buy the farm, where the permittee, the utility, would need to purchase the entire parcel in order to place the line and operate the line on that piece of property. And that's not with all transmission lines, but anything over, I think it's 250 kilovolts, that statute is available to landowners.
And then it would be essentially up to you guys as to whether or not you wanted to proceed in that manner, or if there was an alternate route you'd need to take, yes?
That's correct, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. So when we make our application for a route, the route is actually a term that's defined in state rule, and that route can be a larger width than what is needed for the right-of-way. So our standard route width when we make an application is 1,000 feet. The right-of-way required for a 345 kilovolt transmission line is 150 feet. So we would have 1,000 feet within which to shift that. So that is one thing we could take advantage of if we had a landowner who did not wish to place it on their parcel. Perhaps the adjacent landowner could. But certainly with a 180-mile project, there could be the possibility that we run into a situation where we're not able to successfully negotiate and a landowner would elect to buy the farm.
Thank you for that explanation. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you for the question. So overall timeline of the project, again, the permitting will occur starting this fall and into 2024 and early 25. Construction could begin as early as 2025, and then we anticipate the project to be in service in late 2027. So project constructed and energized by 2027. And the last piece that I just wanted to point out on the last slide here, we'll get this on the camera. We do have ways, as your constituents may have questions, and if you want to turn them, often they want to speak to you first before they speak to us, I guess. But if you do have questions for us, we have some ways for you to contact us directly. Each of these ways of contacting us are project specific. So the website this is project specific information to Minnesota Energy Connection. We have an interactive map. We have opportunity to place comments. Those come in directly to the routing team. We have a frequently asked questions segment. And so I think there's a lot of good information. That's a good place to turn your constituents to if they're looking for more information on the project. And then the phone number and email that are listed here are, again, project-specific phone numbers and emails. They roll right to my phone and Randy's phone. So we've had a lot of good conversations, either over email or by the phone, letting people know about the process and how they can participate. Please keep that handy and feel free to refer your constituents to those information sources.
You heard of the interactive map on the website too.
Yeah, so, and on that website, we do have an interactive map. You can plug in a township and range, you can plug in an address, and it would, zoom right to it. I think it's pretty user-friendly and straightforward, and helps show where we're considering routes, and people can use that to base their comments on.
I just had a comment about your route map specific to Candy, Ohio County. Thank you very much for making use of a map that shows where things like lakes and streams are. We've had somebody else come before us, and I've requested twice now that they give us something that shows where those are, and they don't do it. So I want to thank you for your presentation. It shows that I believe that you guys care deeply about not only providing energy, but also being able to take our citizens and constituents into account. Are there any other questions or comments from the board? Commissioner Dwayne Anderson.
Yep, I just have kind of a question. So in this part of my district, it'd be the southern half of Canada County. In the southeast part, you're replacing transmission lines now, or the poles. Are those proposed routes still, or does it mean that you eliminated them, or did you integrate like possibilities to upgrade so that they could be incorporated as you get the permit? Or I'm just and then if after that question, I have another one about are you going to like maybe upgrade existing lines that are already on the route to incorporate them as as you replace those poles or whatever?
Mr. Chair and Commissioner Anderson, good question, and I think I understand the question. And one thing I'll say about this project is it's a double circuit 345, and so that means that we're not able to co-locate with any other lines. We're sort of with two circuits on the same single pole structure. We're sort of full up for what we can place.
So it's got to be a new line.
It is a new right of way.
Okay,
Yeah.
I see.
Yep. And I'll say that, one thing that the state directs us to do is evaluate existing linear corridors on the landscape, right? That already have development there. So often you see these following roads. Certainly we've got some proposals to parallel some areas of State Highway 23 as part of these, as an example. But that also includes existing transmission lines as an opportunity to parallel an already developed corridor. What we heard very strongly in our feedback in our open houses was that if there's an existing line that's following a field line or a property boundary or a section line, agricultural operations can still occur within that easement, right? We have to route around the foundations, but that's workable. But now if you're going to set another line parallel to that and offset and out into the field, now we got problems. And so the opportunities to follow existing lines sometimes can be really inordinately impactful. And so we've steered away from some of that in our routing based on that feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner Berg.
Just a general question, but first off, it was brought up about the lakes shown on the map and stuff. The first map we had, it was really jagged coming into Candy County and through Meeker County. And as you said, you can see where the lakes are. And that's pretty much of a challenge. What are some of the advantages or disadvantages on the different routes that you could point out? This is kind of new territory as a commissioner.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd go back to Mr. Chair and Commissioner Berg. I really go back to trying to reduce the impacts to the extent possible. Now, one of the tough things is there's a whole range of impacts that we can talk about, whether, and the jagged lines, those are indicators. Everywhere you see one of those in these routes, it's an indicator of us trying to avoid an impact somewhere. Because my transmission line engineers want me to build something as straight as can be, where I can. And so that's, where we have a transmission line along I-94 between Fargo and Monticello that most people are familiar with. There we had an interstate to follow, and that was a very clear developed corridor. We don't really have that going from northeast to southwest between Becker. I've looked, and so so again, the attempt here is to minimize distance of the line, right? Distance equals cost, and so we want to be cost conscious as we're developing this. But we need to avoid some of those all of those resources that I started to describe earlier. It's all the public lands. We're not placing a 100-foot, 50-foot right-of-way down Main Street through the middle of a town. So we've got to avoid towns along the way. Cul-de-sacs, cabin country. That's and again we have to make sure that our airports can operate safely. So there's a whole host of those. So I would just say when you see the jagged lines come through here, those are attempts to avoid those impacts and take those important route development criteria under consideration.
May I follow? Thank you, Mr.
Yes.
Chair. I know you do this, but what would be the impact of climate, a tornado or so? How are they built? What can they withstand?
Sure. So
with the future thinking as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mr. Chair, Commissioner Berg, we build these to operate for 60 years minimum, and so these are concrete foundations. These poles will be placed on concrete foundations. Those, depending on the substrate, they can be 20, 60 feet deep in foundations. Okay. Rebar cage, and then a self-weathering Corten steel on top of that foundation. Foundation size ranges from 7 to 12 feet in diameter. And then again, the Corten steel on top of that foundation makes it really weather hardy. Those kind of big events. We of course operate. I think our company has something like 19,000 miles of transmission lines, and we're located in tornado country, I would say. So in the Midwest, so we do pretty well. Some obviously there are some weather events that can't be withstood, and we're prepared to make repairs and correct it as soon as possible. But pretty sturdy setup.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dale Anderson.
I guess I got a question more, not so much about our county, but the whole thing in general. So there's a big issue about congestion on the power lines and congestion in different areas of the state. You guys are going by a lot of towns. Is there any chance or any place that it could be into a sub somewhere to help with congestion for other areas? Or is this such a high voltage thing that it can only go into one area as an endpoint? I guess that was my question.
Yeah, go ahead with
Thanks, Commissioner, or Mr. Chair and Commissioner. I work a lot on the congestion issue for our company as well. This project in particular isn't designed to solve some of the existing congestion issues that are on the line that are caused essentially by not enough other transmission and too much renewable energy trying to get on it. So two things. One, about this project, it solves some of the issues that could cause further congestion by adding new wind that's in the pipeline in southwest Minnesota, and it'll give it a new outlet. So while it won't solve some of the existing congestion issues, we do expect that it'll have benefits similar to expanding the existing grid and solving some of those congestion issues. And a little bit of primer, since Commissioner Anderson has a pretty good background, I'm not sure if the others do. Congestion on the transmission system in general is causing the curtailment of wind farms throughout southern and southwest Minnesota, because it's relatively easy to build a wind farm. It's relatively difficult to build a transmission line. So when the CapEx 2020 projects and other improvements were made over the the last 20 years or so, those lines are essentially full. There are several projects that are underway to expand the grid, adding the second circuit along I-94, the line that Matt mentioned, some other projects in southern Minnesota, and then also connecting into from kind of the Sherburne County area up to Becker. That'll open up kind of more access to the east and north than easing some of the traffic jam that we're seeing on the transmission system in western Minnesota. So it'll help that, those projects will help that congestion issue. Again, those are a few years away by 2030 or so. But I'll also note that Xcel Energy and other utilities are implementing several other projects that we can do a lot faster. One is adding the second circuit to a line from Brookings, South Dakota to Hampton in Dakota County, south of the cities. Similar to the one along 94, we originally only strung one of those circuits. If it's approved, which we expect it will be, we can start building that one next year. And then, ease some of that congestion as early as summer, fall 2024. They've also started looking at some things they can do within substations. Can we add some equipment in a substation so we don't have to limit electric flow from wind turbines and then curtail some of those projects that are being curtailed? And honestly, that is taking money out of counties' pockets, because if a project is curtailed, counties aren't getting the tax benefits from that production happening. So it's an issue we take really seriously. I haven't seen numbers recently, but I can say just at the end of 2022, in some of that low-hanging fruit system improvements within substations or the way things operate, we reduced congestion in the fourth quarter of 2022 compared to the fourth quarter of 2021 by 50%. So some really fast, immediate things that counties are going to see benefits from this year that they didn't see in 21 and 22 when the problem really started to bubble up. And that'll just get better in the future as we build additional infrastructure throughout the region.
Right. Thank you very much.
Yep.
All right, anybody else? Well, we want to thank you folks for being here with us today. Thank you for all of the information, and we look forward to seeing how this progresses, and if necessary, we hope you'll be back.
Absolutely. We'll be back anytime you'd like to have us. Thanks
Thank
again.
you so
Thank
much.
you.
We will take a much-needed recess. We will be back here in 8 minutes. the Candido County Board of Commissioners back from recess. Next item is the approval of employment recognition policy and the approval of a revised remote work policy and travel policy changes. Connie Mort, our Human Resources Director, is here to present. Good morning, Connie.
Good morning. Again, my name is Connie Mort. I'm the Human Resources Director here at Candy, Ojai County. I come before you today with 3 items. A new policy for employee recognition. These 3 items have come out of discussion from our policy committee, just for some background. We are looking at some of the policies that we feel needing some updating, as well as our employee handbook in its entirety, which will be presented at a later date. The first policy that I'd like to review is a Candy, Ojai employee recognition policy. This is a new policy. We've not had this before, and we've always kind of struggled with the ability to recognize employees, whether they were retiring or leaving employment here at the county, or for other reasons as well, as far as longevity. We have been in the past given out pins for our 5, 10, 15, 20 years, et cetera. But we would like to do a little bit more in recognition of that. And so per statute, Minnesota statute that's listed in our first paragraph, Minnesota statute 15.46 provides that the county may establish a personnel policy and operate a program for employee recognition. And that's what this policy does. The retirement reception piece of it would be, basically cost up to $75 for cake and coffee. It's just something that, that simple, that we just wanted to be able to say that we do have a policy for it under the statute, that we are able to do that. And that's what our auditors had also outlined as well. Okay. Any questions on that one?
Any questions for Connie on the recognition policy? Commissioner Dwayne Henning.
I have a question. That $75, is that enough? I mean,
Yeah.
Maybe some of them retirements, there aren't very many maybe that show up, so it's maybe a small cake, but, so I've been to some that there's been quite a few people, and
Right.
it would probably go over that.
Right. That's a good point. This is what our personnel committee had kind of come up with as far as an average, but
I think that was discussed at the committee meeting, and just to reiterate, the individuals that sit on the committee are myself, Commissioner Gardner, Commissioner Imdike, Mel Odens, Public Works Director, Connie, Attorney Shane Baker, and then we're adding 2 members, Health and Human Services Director Caroline Kahn, and then Community Corrections Tammy Julieberg. So we'll have kind of a good core group reviewing all of our policies. But to answer your question, that dollar amount was discussed. Currently, we don't have anything. And so we thought we would start there. And typically, moving forward with this policy committee, is we want our policies to be reviewed annually, so that, when we're down a year, we can look back and say, $75 wasn't adequate. Let's move it to 100 or 150. But the dollar amount was discussed pretty, a lot, really.
So is that like a little bit flexible, or is it?
Right now, it's not.
Okay.
Right. We didn't put language in there that it is flexible. But like I said, we can review these annually, and if it is approved today, we can look back in December and say, we do need to maybe adjust it moving forward for 2024.
Commissioner Berg.
Administrator Baker, could we word this differently, or to make it more flexible, in the sense that having every year to come back, because of inflation, we got to add this or that, that there would be written in that the administrator would have the authority to approve up to an additional $100 on specific situations?
I mean, we could
Or
do that.
or is that going to affect the policy that, why did so-and-so get a bigger retirement?
Yeah, I don't think,
Or so.
I wouldn't recommend that.
Okay.
I would keep it as is. When we've never had anything like this, I think
No,
we need to just start somewhere.
it's a very good idea.
Yep.
It's been a
And there's other things that we maybe will look at adding. I think because this is a new policy, I think we will review this probably towards the end of the year anyways, just to see how things have gone, and how we can move forward, and maybe how do we add in more employee recognition. We're such a large county with close to 450 employees. It's tough to do all staff events. So this is something that Mel Odens, Connie and I kind of are looking into more on how can we recognize employees. So I'm guessing this will be a policy that we'll look at more regularly before next year as well.
I feel it's, Mr. Chairman, yes, it's a very good policy to move forward in this direction. As we've been doing all along, looking at other ways to support staff and what can we do to groom our staff and make them happy. Thank you.
Anybody else? Just a comment as well. Other recognition events might be also added if they relate to a specific program or project. And there is a provision in here for recognition of sympathy or a memorial as well. And I think these are good policies that are a good first step for us.
Yes, I agree. As has been pointed out, we had no policy in effect, and so therefore we had no funds that were available. And historically, retirements and recognitions and things like that have been funded, by the employees or by the staff. So, this is a good starting point, and we'll, review it as applicable.
Thank you for bringing this to us. Commissioner Burke?
Would you like a motion?
I would.
Oh,
I was just going to ask.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that Canada County Board of Commissioners recognize employment recognition policy, and there's no number on it or anything, but is that word that well
Yep,
enough?
that's fine.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Motion by Berg, second by Commissioner Dale Anderson. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Connie, next item is remote work policy.
Yes. As you're probably aware, we did not have a remote work policy prior to 2021. However, the pandemic kind of forced our hand on that, and we were able to put together a remote work policy kind of not under duress, but a little bit, because we wanted to put something together and have it in place to be able to accommodate those employees that were able to work remotely when we were looking at the different requirements of staff in the building during the pandemic. So.
Yep, I was just hearing that too. Hang on just a moment. It sounds like we might be having a recognition event downstairs right now.
We're having a gathering in the foyer.
Much better.
Thank you.
So again, the remote work policy was drafted and approved by the board in September of 2021. We had taken bits and pieces from other counties and organizations' remote work policies and tried to put them into something that would work for Candy-Ojai County. We believe that after having used the remote work policy for a couple of years, during the pandemic as well as post-pandemic, it has been working well for us. And again, this is another one of those pieces that we're looking at for employee retention and attraction, because remote work has become very common in the workplace. And so even while we like to have our staff with us and we like to have that camaraderie and that piece of having our staff in the building, there is a place for remote work, and it is, we really would like to take a look at that. So the remote work policy stays in effect, but there are some changes to it that we would like to bring forward. One of the changes was there was a remote work location. It had to be the employee's residence unless otherwise approved. We've struck that from the policy just because there are a lot of times that the remote workplace might be, when someone is at a conference, if they are, working maybe at their lake cabin, but kind of defeats the purpose of a lake cabin. But if you're working at your lake cabin and things like that, so it won't just be the employees, the location of their residence. Okay, so we struck that. Then, under minimum employee criteria, under A, we struck that as well because that said that an eligible employee had to work for us continuously for a minimum of 12 months. So the employee had to work for us for a year before they could work remotely. And we're leaving that up to the supervisor and/or department head to determine the capability of that employee to be able to work remotely. Then also, under general provisions, the employees under D, employees approved for remote work would be expected at a minimum to come into their official work week once a week to pick up mail, print documents, things like that. We've changed that. We've struck all of that language except after a week, we've added every pay period. So employees approved for remote work will be expected at a minimum to come to their official work site once every pay period. And that would be to check in with their, department heads or supervisors, connect with their co-employees, those types of things. We're not going to dictate what they're going to do on that day in.
And Connie, if I may, we talked about this, and we're still leaving in the language that this is going to be determined in consultation with that employee's supervisor.
Correct, yes.
Commissioner Burke.
Yeah, thank you. You pretty well clarified what I was going to ask, but I guess my concern is, and I think the work-at-home policy is a good idea, a good movement, yet I'm still kind of old school when it comes to a lot of this stuff about it's important to be there. And I kind of feel that the trend is going towards people pulling people back in. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of a say, well, come in every 2 weeks now instead of every week.
Right. I think that.
Can you explain why?
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
that's not many times to see an employee.
It's not. That is our minimum requirement. And again, this would be up to the supervisor or the department head to determine. If they determine that they would like to have their employees, for whatever reason, maybe they are working 3 days from home and 2 days they come in, that's going to be a supervisory requirement. There are some of our departments that, working remotely from home 100% of the time, or, for every day except 1 day for a 2-week pay period is not going to be sufficient. And that's going to be up to the supervisor, the employee, and the department head to determine. This is a minimum, again.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So by coming in too, you're not saying you come in for the full day. You're saying they just have to come in, check in. It could be an hour or whatever.
No, it's for a day.
Well,
Yeah,
it is
that
for a
would be,
day.
that would be
Didn't
for a
seem
day.
like
Typically, right now, as it states, they come in once a week. I can think of one employee, she comes in every Thursday. So every Thursday, she knows she's in the office. And that would still be that same mindset. And those employees that still want to come in once a week have every right to do so.
yeah.
Some employees will work from home Monday and Fridays and then come into the office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Like Connie has stated, this is a point to retain employees, and it's an attraction for some that might want to work remotely. And I think what we talked about in that policy committee was, how are employees the most productive? You can have an employee sit at their desk from 8 to 4:30 and they're scrolling through Instagram and TikTok and shopping on Amazon or whatever they may be doing, and they're maybe not as productive. We don't, those are things that it's up to the supervisor. And so part of these changes is we're putting more, I hate to use the word control, but more control on the supervisor and awareness that it's up to the supervisor or department head on how they see fit and how that employee or their employee is the most efficient and productive.
And essentially, we're empowering the supervisors to work with their employees. That's the
Yeah.
primary intent of the changes that we have in here. Commissioner Burke. Okay. Well, I think you answered, well, I did have a couple of other questions. Every position is so different, so when they do come in for that day, every 2 weeks then now, if we determine this is the policy we want to go, do they go to their work site here, or it depends on the job, I suppose, right? I mean, do you have to have duplicate computers for them to access? And I had another follow-up question, maybe I just add it, and you don't have to keep bothering you. About how many people do we have on work-at-home policy? But, okay, First off, answer the first one, yeah.
Oh, sure. Well, I would say probably 2/3 to 3/4 of the staff in this building have a remote work policy or a remote work agreement on file with me. That doesn't necessarily mean that we've got 3/4 of our staff working remotely, but we do have those remote work agreements on file. And so they're able to work from home, again, per their supervisor. If this is an intermittent thing, excuse me, if they're not able to come into work for whatever reason, COVID kind of is coming back a little bit. And so let's just say that they had a positive COVID result and they're required to stay home for at least 5 days. If they have their laptop with them, they would be able to work for those 5 days if they felt able to do that. Again, that's going to have to be up to the employee and to the supervisor. Now, as far as the unit that here at the office, if they're gone or if they really are working totally remotely from home and they're only coming in that 1 day every 2 weeks, we would have, and I believe that we've talked about doing this with our facilities maintenance and then also with our department heads, having basically cubes that would be available for them to plug into. And I think the great majority of our staff that are working from home have laptops that they have both at home and then they bring them in and they work here with them as well. I know and I shouldn't speak for the entire IT department, but I think that's kind of where we've tried to go with remote work, is basically with laptops. A lot of our staff prior to this did have laptops that they were using in the field or at home or at a remote workplace before we had this policy, just because of their job. And once we started this, I think that's kind of what we migrated to. I know that I myself have a dock here at the office, and I plug my laptop into that and work off of it here. And then if I'm going to be working remotely, then I take my laptop with me, and I have a VPN address that I can log into and get into my files here at work. So, does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson.
Yeah, I think the remote work policy, I can think of examples where it would really be beneficial. Like me, I'm 25 miles from home. And if I, had a job here, it would be really helpful, and not only just for the pandemic, but last winter was a bugger too, because all the snowstorms we had. And so some people think maybe we're less efficient, but on days where you have bad weather, I would think you'd end up being more efficient than if you had to have everybody come in, because some cases you just can't make it in on
Right.
that sort of situation.
And that's a really good point, and I'm glad you brought it up. A lot of our intermittent work agreements are for that reason specifically. That we have employees that live, 10, 20 more miles from the office, and they, we're in an age of pretty good meteorology, and so they're able to forecast those storms. And a lot of times, people will I'll take my laptop home with me if I hadn't thought about working remotely, just if there was going to be a weather event. So if there's going to be a weather event, I think a lot of people do prepare for that, and they have that intermittent remote work agreement on file just for that reason.
Yeah. Mr. Chair. Yeah. I just really like to say that I'm still feeling very uncomfortable about extending it to come in once every 2 weeks for an employee. I think that it's important we have a policy like this, but I think it's important that employees see their peers, their supervisors, face to face. As I know, it's not the same thing going on Zoom meetings, but they got pretty tiring there for a while, and you didn't have the same connection. And I just really think that's so important from that point of view of it. And as a board, that we could set that policy, and we do trust our supervisors and department heads and administrators of overseeing that. But we set the policy, and I think it's my point of view is I think once a week is not unreasonable and very workable for most people.
Just to clarify, that is a minimum expectation. It's not necessarily going to be the norm, but it's going to be determined by the supervisor and/or the department head, yes?
That is correct. Just because it's in this policy, we're not going to be able to, to come to our supervisor and say, well, the policy says I only have to come in 1 day every 2 weeks. It's still going to be absolutely up to the supervisor to determine when and where that employee is going to be doing their work. And if it's not something that's going to be workable for only coming in once every 2 weeks, that supervisor is going to know that, and that employee is going to be required to report to work, whether it's 2 days a week, 1 day every 2 weeks, or whatever the case may be for that particular employee and supervisor.
All right, please continue.
Okay. All right. And so the rest of these in here are there's just some few little pieces. We're taking IT department out of a few places where it's just going to be approved by the supervisor. Under worksite criteria would be our next line item that I have highlighted, and that's on page 6. Under item B, the employee is expected to report to the employee's official worksite in a reasonable amount of time from the remote worksite, with exceptions approved by the supervisor. And we struck "and under no circumstances outside the state of Minnesota." This was really hard because it's like, well, if you're going to be, what if you're in DC, for a week and you're working away from there? Well, and according to our policy, you're not allowed to work remotely. I have a home in Florida that I work remotely from if I'm down there on vacation. And so, again, not working on vacation, but
Yeah, right. Exactly.
but if I'm checking my email or whatever, so this policy would, if we did not strike the language with under no circumstances outside the state of Minnesota, it would be really difficult for people to be working those remote locations.
And I just want to point out the very next item, which stays in the language which says that, because I want this clear to the public and anybody who's listening today, that it says remote workers will manage child and dependent care and personal responsibilities in the same way that they meet these responsibilities while working at the official work site. They will work remotely and arrange to work in an environment free from family or personal distractions, etc. This isn't hey, nobody's watching, you can do whatever you want. You're still expected to do the same work, but we're giving the employee and their supervisor the flexibility to make an arrangement that works for everybody, and it does speak to attraction and retention. Dale, did you have something? Commissioner
well,
Dale Anderson.
I just got to comment on your last thing you said, because I think it is so true. You said, I've got a place in Florida where I work when I'm on vacation. And I think that's the biggest thing that I guess I like about having this work at home policy is today's world, we're working every day. We work till midnight. I mean, we've always got our phones on. We most of the time have our laptops on. If we're on vacation, we're still working from at home. So I guess that's the biggest reason I like what you guys are doing here, and you've had time to experience through this now for a couple of years. I mean, I think our day and age of going to work at 8 o'clock and going home at 4 and not thinking about it again, that isn't reality anymore. We're thinking about work from 5 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night when we go to bed. So I'm glad we have this, and I think it's very important that we do give people a chance to do things like this. And retention will be our number one thing by having a policy like this. So I really appreciate what you guys are working on.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Like I said, this has been in place since 2021. And as Commissioner Anderson just stated, we're working through some of the things that we found have worked or haven't worked, or what some of the adjustments need to be. And that's what we're looking at here in these revisions. So thank you.
All right, are there any other questions for Connie on the remote work policy? If not, Commissioner Anderson.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the homework policy.
There's a motion to approve the remote work policy. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson seconds. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the remote work policy signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Connie, we have travel, meals, and other expenses.
Okay, this is my last policy revision, travel, meals, and other expenses. This policy has not been updated for quite some time, and so in that regard, we're looking at a couple of dollar amount changes that we're looking at for different fees and travel expenses for reimbursements. So there was under out-of-state travel towards the bottom of the page, under section 1, the cost of conference institute training programs and related travel must be within the annual travel expense budget approved by the county board. So you've got to stay within your budget, regardless of what's in this policy. So budget accordingly to what you are going to have to do for travel. Exceptions may be made by the approval of the county administrator was struck from there just because, we're expecting you to stay within your budgets. The county will pay up to $3,000 per employee for applicable registration, lodging, and transportation cost. Exceptions may be made with the approval of the county administrator. So that piece of it was may be made with the exception of the county administrator. We went from 2,500 to 3,000. And that includes some pretty lengthy stays and airline travel and that kind of thing. We're looking at those specifically. If there's specific training and or conferences that need to be attended by staff, and those types of things are going to go into the $3,000 limit. We're not going to say we're going to St. Cloud for a conference and we've got $3,000 to spend. That's not the thought process.
Commissioner Berg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're all assigned to committees we have to attend, Association of Minnesota Counties. Is that included in that when we have to attend those board meetings?
No.
AMC is not involved in this?
No, this is out-of-state travel.
Yep, this
Just
would be
out
out
of
of
state.
state, yes.
Okay.
Yep,
Yep.
under B, out-of-state travel.
Any other normal travel is still included within this policy, but the out-of-state, and I think why we have the exceptions may be made with the approval of the county administrator, we move that to the end. And our thought process was because if you go to, let's say you go to a NACO conference and you go to that, it's at $3,200. You can let me know and, that would be something that I would work with the auditor's office. It's not just those national conferences that commissioners go to out of state, or we might have a director or department head. We have, a child protection social worker that will have to transport children maybe down to Alabama, West Virginia, maybe at just whatever state. That's considered out of state travel as well. And so I just can't think of those NACO conferences. We have to think of how will this affect all 400 plus employees that could have this opportunity. I think Mel Oden's brought up when they send their maintenance workers or engineers to travel, it might be in Fargo, North Dakota. Technically, that's out-of-state travel. Do you know what I mean? Or Sioux Falls, South Dakota, I think where one of the conferences are. And so those were things that we kind of all discussed, that even though they're bordering states, that's still considered out-of-state travel. And so we felt that putting a dollar amount on it was a parameter, at least for staff to follow. I know some counties don't have a dollar amount at all. It's, it's free will, or up to their discretion, I should say. But I think having this dollar amount, we felt was necessary, even moving from 2,500 to 3,000.
All right, Connie.
Okay. And the next piece that I had on that out-of-state travel also was number 4 on the following page. And we struck out-of-state travel policies will be reviewed annually by the county board. We'll be looking at those, in the policy committee and then bringing, suggested changes to the board itself. So then under reimbursement procedures, under D, under E, it's kind of indented there. Meal allotment, authorized meal expenses shall be reimbursed at the rate of, and it was $36 a day, it's now $80 a day. We've changed it to that. It's well within the parameters that are outlined. And it's just an increase because $36 for a day's worth of meals was kind of unrealistic if you're going to be gone for the entire day. So that would include breakfast, lunch, dinner. Meals will be reimbursed only when they are associated with overnight travel trips and for county business. Receipts for all meals must be submitted, et cetera, just as they were prior. So overnight travel trips, as determined by your supervisor. So we talked a little bit about that as well. You know, if you have a training in Rochester that's going to start at 7:30 in the morning, you know, this is going to be a little bit of a haul from here to get there at 7:30 in the morning. So you might stay previous evening. Your supervisor may approve you to stay the previous evening for this training the next day, and then you come home that day. That would still be overnight travel, and that would be included. And that is at the discretion of the supervisor as well. On the following page at the top, I just wanted to say, you know, as talking about the meal allotment, $80 a day, and someone brought up, well, what if somebody goes and has a $60 steak for dinner and that's all that they eat that day? And I said, well, that's why we have in here, employees are encouraged to be conscientious consumers while selecting meal choices. We want our employees to be conscientious about spending the county's dollars, which is in fact, the taxpayers' dollars. We want them to be conscientious consumers. And those will be, you know, outlined by supervisors as well.
Commissioner
Mr. Chair,
Berg.
thank you. And so am I. I'm worried about the taxpayers' dollars, and we want employees to be very reasonable when they do this. I totally agree that $36 is not enough. But my majority of the time, I think a lot of times we are going to some conferences or some training or some meeting that there's at least one meal included in that, you know, so, and I know from previous work experience that a lot of employees, you know, well, okay, I'm here, I'm going to do this and enjoy that meal. And I understand where they're coming from. And I trust our employees, but I think we're setting a maximum on this, and from 36 to 80 is a big jump. And generally speaking, and we can also deal with exceptions if it goes over that. If somebody has to go over that, there is some kind of meeting, you know, some of these like NACO meetings where you're stuck in a hotel and that's the only dining room you have to go to.
Right.
You can easily spend $80 and have exceptions, but I just feel that's kind of a big jump. And I was thinking maybe 60, but
$80 was, we talked with surrounding counties and counties our size, $80 was kind of the average
It is.
cost. Some were a little bit higher. Some, you know, I would say it was between 70 and 90. So we thought we'd go with 80. We felt that that was adequate. I mean, and Connie's mentioned this before. If you look when this policy came about, it was 2013. Where in 2023, this policy was really outdated. So 36 was extremely low. I would say, you know, in my previous life in another county, $60 was probably 3-4 years ago.
Mr. Chairman, may I follow up?
Yes.
Yep.
What would the financial impact be, do you think?
You know, we still
I
haven't,
don't mean to put you on the spot either, or maybe let us know later.
yep, we're
And
not,
did we budget for this then?
we're not changing anything in the budget.
Okay.
Because still, post-COVID, we still have a lot of webinars. A lot of staff still don't attend a conference in person. They still will do an online conference. And like you had mentioned too, if there is a meal that's provided, you're not going to get reimbursed. If you go out for lunch and there was a meal that was provided, that lunch then is your choice and that's on you. You know, and so it's going to be communicating. I plan to put this on the department head agenda for October. We're going to be talking to supervisors. You know, we want staff to take some ownership in what they're doing, and we, you know, be conscious of that. In any part of the job, we have to worry about the taxpayer dollar and how we're utilizing the best dollar. But we can't tie our employees' hands either, and we need to provide them some flexibility and some ownership on using their best judgment. And I think this is one way to start doing that.
And Mr. Chairman, I felt I have to ask these questions. I think we're expected to ask these questions because I'm part of the committee, so
Yep.
thank you. Good explanation.
Absolutely.
I suspect that Roger and Mel are not going to find dinner in Washington DC for $36 tonight.
And
I wish them luck.
Yeah.
All right, that is the extent of the changes that I have in the travel policy.
All right, are there any other questions regarding the travel policy? Is there a motion? The chair will move to approve the travel policy as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Commissioner Dwayne Anderson. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Connie.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. And thank you for your work on this. All right, we are out to administrative updates, appointments, so on and so forth. Do we have any appointments that we need to take care of today? All right. Well, then we'll start with reports. I'm going to talk very briefly about the AMC policy conference that we were all at last week. I sit on the General Government Policy Committee, and at the recent conference, I was elected as the chair of the General Government Policy Committee moving forward, which also means that I will be seated on the AMC Board of Directors as well. So in our committee, we talked about the tax forfeiture issue. As you may or may not know, the Supreme Court ruled against Hennepin County on an issue, ruled that there was an illegal taking of assets from a tax forfeiture, and now essentially the entire statute is going to have to be rewritten from the ground up. The Supreme Court did not find that it was out of bounds for the state or the counties to administer a tax forfeiture program, but it needs to fit within certain parameters. And they were very clear about what those guidelines are going to be. This is a very high priority for AMC, and especially in the general government, but especially for those counties up north where they are very heavily have public lands. Their taxable base is relatively small. But this is a statewide issue. They'll be putting together a study group, and they'll be working with our legislators. The legislature is going to have to deal with this issue next year. It is the one priority coming out of the General Government Committee. The other item I had is that I wanted to take some time to address the issue that came before us at our last meeting, citing advice of counsel. I was prevented last week from talking about the board's public statement regarding Administrator Kelsey Baker's 6-month review. Given the changing circumstances, I'm going to share those thoughts today. The statement was approved on a 3-2 vote without any discussion. I voted against the statement not because discussion of it would have revealed too much, but because this tepid and even insulting public statement didn't say enough about who Kelsey Baker is. And in short, her job performance has been nothing short of spectacular in this commissioner's eyes. My interactions with Kelsey have always been wide-ranging and professional. I've done my level best to advise and support her as she began her work here. She took this position against strong prevailing headwinds with various others inside the organization, believing that we made an egregious error in her hiring. Kelsey dove right in and began cultivating followership and buy-in for a common shared vision among the rank and file as well as senior staff. Kelsey also made a strategically important decision to maintain office hours in our downtown office building as she continues to build relationships and trust among the staff. Kelsey recognizes the need to retain and attract staff, and this is reflected in her recommendation, adopted by the board, to increase the entire wage schedule by 5% on January 1, and encouraged administrative staff to come up with more ideas which were ultimately adopted by the board and others that are being ratified by various bargaining units. There may have been some concerns early on when several staff left the county to pursue other employment, specifically the HHS director and the deputy auditor. To my eye, those were personal decisions made for multiple reasons and are not reflective of Kelsey or her leadership. To think so would be to ignore a rather simple truth. Whenever there is a change in leadership in any organization, there will be voluntary turnover just as sure as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. Outside the organization, community leaders across the spectrum hold Kelsey in the highest regard, and many have commented to me that her hiring was a master stroke by the board. I find Kelsey to be refreshing and even fascinating as someone who freely says what is on her mind at various moments during a conversation, not because she has come to an answer, but because she quite literally thinks out loud at times and is inviting of being challenged. Kelsey is quite self-aware and open to conversations with other strong personalities. She knows simultaneously that she has a wealth of knowledge and in her toolbox, and that she doesn't have all the answers all the time. She knows that working with other subject matter experts inside and outside the organization results in a better result to any given challenge. We hired Kelsey to bring a fresh set of eyes to the county and its operations. And I am today more than ever convinced that we made an astute choice. In speaking with one of her former Swift County commissioners, he noted that well-regarded professionals like Kelsey are always in high demand, and given her skill set and reputation among her peers, we might only have her here for 5 years or so. I told my friend from Swift County that if I could have a guarantee of having Kelsey as our administrator for 5 years, I'd take that in a heartbeat. It means that we reached out for a star, and that Candy, Ohio County would be in an even better position at the end of that term. Sometimes greatness is not recognized or appreciated. For those cold and timid souls who are made uncomfortable with Kelsey's candid assessment of where Candy, Ohio County stands among its peers, their lack of imagination for what could be and preference for what was saddens me. Kelsey, for this commissioner, you are more than enough. You have thrown your entire being into this work, and our county is already seeing those efforts and those of the entire administrative team pay off. Our workforce is and will continue to be better off for your being in the administrator's office. As the next weeks and months play out, I just want you to know that I see you, and I appreciate you in the strongest possible terms. Thank you for taking a chance on us. With that, I will move over to Commissioner Dale Anderson for his report.
All right. Had a couple of meetings this month. One of the big things I was involved in at the AMC fall policy thing was I'm on the public safety committee, and it was kind of interesting. We had a huge discussion about ambulance services in the state and in the area, on that they don't get paid unless they are actually hauling a person to a hospital somewhere or to a facility, and that the funding for that is getting to be very serious. If they're privately owned, they are having a hard time making it. Probably was our biggest discussion factor was that. Another big thing that was talked about was the dispatch centers, on kind of the same thing, funding for them and how much time and effort they put into the dispatch part of it. The other thing that we've talked about in our boardroom here and was brought up, and we had representation from Kennewick County, was the radar gap for storm watchers. Very much caught people off guard in our committee. I was looking around the room and was shocked to see a lot of blank faces and a lot of shocked expressions on that presentation. I think that there will be a lot more discussion through AMC and through that committee to try and work and get funding for that endeavor to make that more of a viable option for getting some more radars put up around. I was happy to hear that Princeburg is one of the locations that will be having a structure put on top of their water tower in October here. So that's kind of exciting to see that happen. That was kind of the big discussions for the fall policy. We had a building committee meeting here last week. Talked about aesthetics for this building. Everybody says this is still a new building. I mean, I get that impression, but it's really not a new building. It's getting to be 11, 12 years old now, and it's starting to need a few repairs and things changed. So I'm looking some things to do in here. and also looking at a long-range plan for this building and all the other county buildings, to see what things could be changed or made more efficient. Connie was talking about the remote working situation, to address that a little bit, and just different things in the buildings that the county has, to do some updating and just do some, making them more efficient. So that's an ongoing thing. At some point in time, I'm guessing that committee will come with a recommendation to this board, for different things to do for that. Last Monday, I had a historical society meeting. That's one committee that still just amazes me. I knew nothing about the historical society. I keep thinking I'm young, so I think I don't need to worry about the historical society. But it's really interesting, and they've got very interesting programming coming. They actually have a cemetery tour, which they will have actors in the cemetery going from different stations, and that's being organized through the Tripolis Church. And so keep your eyes out. I know, I can't remember the exact date. I didn't remember to bring the brochure with, but that's coming up. Very interesting thing, I think, to find out some history about different people that were from our community, and are buried in that cemetery. It's the first time they're doing it. There'll be a lunch, I think, if you want, with that. But I think it's an important thing. I'm in charge of our local cemetery, and I could think of people in our cemetery that have interesting history for our area. And I think it's something that I hope they keep doing for different areas, to find out some of this family history that's been brought into our area. So that's interesting. They're going to be doing some huge repairs on the house that's right next to the Historical Society next summer, hopefully. They got a grant that they applied for, and that building is starting to need some repairs. It's aging, and they're looking at doing some renovations to that building, so there'll be a process of going through that and working on that. So them are a few things that I guess I was involved in this last couple of weeks, and that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Berg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to go back to what you're talking about, also, I got involved with the Historical Society some time ago too, to a degree. But they're also building history now, getting stories together. I got contacted by somebody just recently, maybe 40 years ago, something was going on. And well, they want more information about that, so it goes in there, your point of view. And that was really kind of interesting. Like, I never thought about, like you said, you don't think you're getting old, but we are the history, I guess, or the future history. And they want to make sure it gets documented and things go in. So that's very interesting. I attended the Association of Minnesota Counties policy meeting for the 2.5 days, and I'm on the Health and Human Services Committee, and I spent about 8 hours over those 2.5 days trying to develop some policy to go forward. As you know, Health and Human Services is a big department and a lot of different programs going on, and there's so many different other aspects of county-based purchasing, and also the IT information that we have with the state on all these programs are so outdated. And so, do we focus on just people and helping people and eliminating barriers and so forth, or what kind of programs do we do? And our goal is to come up with 5 policies, because sure, there's a lot of change that's got to be taking place, and I know, commissioners, you've all ran into that with your committees too, but we have to come up with a legislative policy that the legislative individuals that represent us can really support and move and take action on. And so it may have to be a smaller piece than something more grand and large. So that was very interesting, and we're going to be following up on that again in December. And there's some in between too. We work with emails, working on legislative policies as that as well. I had a Hot Creek project meeting, and they had their annual picnic with other people that they worked with in Maynard, and I had a chance to attend that picnic at noon because I had an 18 County Mental Health Consortium meeting in Marshall that morning. And we're still struggling with funding for our mental health issues, and even though the state legislature, passed a lot of additional dollars for mental health, we are still struggling in many ways, and one of the ways that they're concerned about is the way it's structured, and they're trying to work with the Department of Human Services about that, of how the cash flow, way they pay out some of their grants and their dollars. And so around the first of the year, they're always running short on dollars. And last year, Prime West actually borrowed the 18 County Mental Health Consortium some money just to carry them over. And we paid that back. But now we got this, we want to plan ahead. So we got the end of the year coming up and next year. So we're trying to think what way and communicate more with the Department of Human Services, in which we are trying to do and have been, but to get this all worked out, that we would have the dollars come in at a different procedures. One thing I want to maybe go back, we didn't get much time after the last board meeting, at Woodland Centers, both Steve and I sit on that, Commissioner Gardner and myself sit on that board, and they voted after a lot of study and review to not do detox any further, effective the end of December 31st. There's already some works in the plans, and the Administrator Baker, Health and Human Service Director, and Woodland Center staff and other people are trying to work together, come up with a plan, the best way to deal with this, and they're making some progress. But I just wanted to give you a heads up, and Director Ashley Schroes is going to be coming to our board meeting. Is that coming up next month, right?
I believe the second meeting in October.
And she'll give us more of an update on what's going on there with all their programs. So they got a lot going on, and there's a lot of different reasons that they decided not to continue their detox. So that will be a change. We do have a few months to work on that, and we will make this work out okay. We got a PAC 4 annual meeting coming up. That's coming up Thursday, and I had a Prime West meeting for your information, and I just want to pass on, as you know, I brought up before about they wanted a flag from each county to fly in front of their building. It's going to look like the United Nations or something with all these different counties that are members of it. And we don't have a county flag. So I talked to Administrator Baker, and we submitted then our logo. And I saw the proof on that, and I'm going to put it on a white background. And we still don't have an official flag, but they're going to make a flag, and they're going to make an extra flag for each county. So we'll be bringing back a flag one of these days, or they'll be shipping it here for us. And we have to decide, do we hang this? Do we call this a temporary county flag or not? Or do we want to tweak it and change it? So I just want to give you a heads up on that. It's pretty much everything. I think all of us are probably at the open house for the rescue squad. So that's enough for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Burke. Kelsey, I know we're keeping you from your 11:30 meeting. Do you have anything for us today?
I do, and that's okay. Karen, I just sent her an email. I said, "You're the best, thank you," because no, that's okay. We moved it to Thursday at 10 a.m., so I'm fine.
Okay. All right. Then go ahead. Annie.
Okay. As Dale Anderson mentioned, the building committee, I think this is really important that I don't believe we have any deferred maintenance here in Candioi County, but it's good to stay on top of where we are aesthetically and structurally, and so we're just really in the beginning stages of that. It's Commissioner Dale Anderson, Commissioner M. Dyke, myself, Facilities Director Andy Thorson, and then we have Engen and Associates rep sit in on that as well. We've worked with Engen and Associates for many years, way before my time as well. And so we have her sitting as a rep just to make sure that, what the work that we've done at the downtown office, that's up to speed. We just did that about 5-6 years ago, I believe. And so we'll be working with them moving forward. But I think there will be some requests coming back to the board at future meetings on how we move forward. And maybe some dollar amounts requesting, can we have a cap on a certain project level, things like that, so that we're able to give direction to facilities and to move these projects forward. I also attended the AMC policy conference as well last week. I sit on the general government along with Steve, And I think it's important, though, at our opening session, we did have Sheriff Tullifson and Dispatch Supervisor Jody Narsegard sit on a panel regarding our services with, our agreement services with Big Stone County. And I think they did a really good job. It just shows the cross-county collaboration that can happen, and we've done this for a number of years. I think they prefaced very well that this doesn't always fit small counties. You have to have your sheriff on board if you're gonna close your dispatch center, things like that. But they did a really good job, and I thought represented Candy Ohio County really well. So I was proud to see them up there, and that was really fun to see. And then just a side note, last week and this week, we're kind of wrapping up our United Way campaign. We've done this for a number of years. Just the last couple of years, we've done more, I would say more fun events throughout the year. And so I'll just say the one event that I did last Monday was the Loose Change Challenge. And I literally went to every office and every cubicle that people were there and asked them for their loose change. And I was really alarmed how many staff have a lot of quarters, and I won't say dollar amounts, of how much change they actually have in their desk. And I was like, it was a little alarming. I'm like, you shouldn't hold that much money in your desk. But it was fun to see all the employees being so gracious. We did the golf tournament. We had the pie throwing contest last Friday. And so it's just one way for staff to have fun while they're at work. So that's all I have.
Karen mentioned just before we went on here today that they're just $981 short of the $10,000 goal. So hopefully that can be worked up. I maybe didn't ask everybody explicitly, but once again, I was not chosen to be jailed as part of the jail and bail. And my fellow commissioners might have wanted to put some money towards it had I talked about it a little more openly. So there's still time. You can send me somewhere, but if you feel like it, give to the County United Way. Commissioner Dwayne Anderson.
Okay. Yeah, in the last couple of weeks, I had several meetings. I went to a couple fun events, which aren't meetings, but I went to the Canyon County Rescue 75th anniversary. I don't know if you call it celebration or open house, and that was pretty interesting. My kids enjoyed it. And then also I went to a Dun Agro demonstration, which is where people are trying to raise commercial hemp. I guess it isn't for smoking, but it is for making different products. And it was in my district, and it was quite interesting to watch how they are going to try to harvest it if they do decide to move forward with putting up a facility here in Canyon County. I went to a CEC interview, which is County Extension Committee, where we're looking at hiring maybe another extension service employee. I'm not sure where we are on that just yet, but the final decision maybe hasn't been made quite yet. So, and I was at an Economic Development Commission broadband meeting here a week or so ago, and things are going good. It's kind of interesting. When I first got on that committee, everything was kind of like, how are we going to get anything done? Now everything's moving full steam ahead as far as getting projects done in the county for high-speed internet, and I'm hoping we can keep the momentum going as we run out of the stimulus money, and we'll see how that turns out in the next couple of years. But right now it's going real good, and I'm just really happy to see the progress being made in the county. I had a CMJTS Joint Powers Board meeting, which is Barb Chafee. She gave the presentation this morning about that, so I don't really have to go much into that one. And then I had a Safe Roads Coalition meeting with Kellen Hemish about a week ago. And just what that one does, it talks about accident reports, and they go over what time of day they happen. It's kind of surprising to see what day of the week, and I always thought weekends were the worst, but it's actually Wednesday is one of the worst days for accidents. And that's kind of surprising and kind of interesting to go through all those kind of statistics. And then last week we had our AMC conference, our policy conference, and I attended the Environment and Natural Resources Committee where we talked about several things, but we didn't really come up with too many policy decisions just yet. We're going to bring about 3 or 4 items, I think, to the annual meeting and present that at that time. Some of the things that are kind of interesting, there's a bottle bill being proposed, which is adding a 5 or 10 cent fee to pop cans and bottles that people buy, and then they get it returned, or they return it and they get that nickel or that dime back. But then there's things that you don't really think about, and one of the consequences might be if the state went ahead with that, which it sounds like a good idea, but if they went ahead with that, it would really affect our single sort recycling, because bottles and cans are one of the biggest sources of revenue for recycling, and that would affect the people that do the single sort recycling, and then they might end up dropping us as a result if we went that route, because their major source of revenue would drop way off. Then we also discussed the waters of the United States. A lot of discussion was with landfills. PFAS is becoming an issue. It's found in groundwater now, and it's basically a product that's used on a lot of like appliances where you don't want to have fingerprints show up, and so that's sprayed on the surface or put on there somehow, but it ends up getting into our environment, and there's going to be a ban on that. But at the same time, it's ending up in our landfills, and the state is requiring us to regulate that or to monitor that, and we're always trying to find out ways to maybe ask the state to help us with paying for that cost. And we also talked about tax forfeited properties, because that Supreme Court decision, and how we're going to maybe deal with that. I know other committees had that same discussion, but one of the things that came up was possibly suggesting that we turn it back over to the state to deal with forfeitures, but the state kind of does regulate that in the first place. So right now it's just kind of like, what do we do? And so we don't really know at this point.
The state puts that on counties, and we receive no reimbursement for that.
Yep.
We bear all the costs.
Yep.
And there's a possibility that there may be some class actions taken, that counties may be in some way, shape, or form held responsible for. That's going to be a topic of the conversations at the legislature.
Yep.
Our partners at the state are going to have to make us whole on that.
Mr. Chair. Commissioner, may I just kind of follow up, Commissioner Anderson, on your comment, the COVID dollars or ARPA dollars all gone or committed? They're
Not quite yet, but if
yeah.
what we're hoping gets done,
Yeah.
they will be all
We've been
used.
talking about maybe having a work session and what's left over and how to go on that. And can you just quickly give us a 1 minute update?
Yep. So I think I'm trying to tie, if I can, creatively, tie hand in hand the opioid dollars and then the ARP dollars. And so I'm working with we have kind of a opioid task force internally. I don't have an update. We've talked about doing a community survey. You have to do some sort of a public comment period, whether that's just presenting your options at a public board meeting, or if that's doing a survey. Some counties surrounding us have done an opioid dollar survey. And so we're kind of finalizing that. Once that's all done, I'd like to come back to the board and do kind of an ARP. Here's where we're at. Can we provide some more direction? Because I did present on the ARP dollars back in April, and there really wasn't any direction. It was just kind of, here's where we're at with our remaining dollars. Because if we use all of the broadband dollars, it leaves us with, I think it was around $1.8 million remaining. Now we have some options with the local housing trust fund, but that changes a little bit because we did just get some state housing dollars. And so does that change a dollar amount, things like that? And so I'm just waiting more or less for the dust to settle with some of the budgetary items. And then hopefully I'll bring back and we can have some, the board can provide some direction on opioid and ARP dollars.
So when, Mr. Chairman, When would we have a work session then to talk about that?
I don't know if we
Because I
would-
was wondering if we shouldn't have a work session. We've been asking to have one. Because I think the board might have some ideas too, you know.
I don't know if, we could have a work session. I don't know if we necessarily have to have a work session. We've had work sessions. I think right now we need some direction on
Well,
which way to go. And so we,
No, yeah,
yep, and maybe I can do that at the second meeting in October then.
okay.
All right. Dwayne,
done.
were you done?
Yep.
All right.
Okay.
Well, all right. If there's nothing else for the board, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.